President Zelensky urges NATO defence ministers to send tanks now as pressure mounts on Germany to step up its support for Ukraine. World leaders say they're cautiously optimistic for the global economy as the World Economic Forum in Davos comes to an end.
With a pledge to build back better, President Joe Biden says California's storms are a climate change wake-up call.
In what could be a decisive moment in the war in Ukraine, NATO defence ministers are meeting in Germany to discuss Kyiv's request for Western battle tanks. Officials are convening at the Ramstein airbase as pressure mounts on Berlin to send its Leopard 2 model. Ahead of the talks, the US Defence Secretary announced a new military package for Kyiv, but once again, tanks were off the table.
This new assistance package also helps meet Ukraine's urgent need for armor and combat vehicles. So we're providing 59 more Bradleys, 90 Strykers, 53 MRAPs, and 350 up-armored Humvees.
Ukraine says it will need hundreds of Western tanks for future counter-offensives against Russia. Joining the meeting from Kyiv, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called for a definitive decision today.
It is in your power to make a Ramstein of tanks, not to bargain about different numbers of tanks, but to open a principled supply that will stop Russian evil.
Whatever the outcome, Ukraine has been assured it will receive at least 14 Challenger tanks from the UK. Britain says its offer is not conditional on other allies making similar donations. Separately, Poland says it may not wait for German approval to send its Leopard tanks. The World Economic Forum at Davos has ended with a mixture of mild optimism and caution for the global economy. The annual gathering in Switzerland of financial and political leaders comes after a year of soaring inflation and an energy crisis fueled by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But members of this year's final panel voiced hope that a severe recession may be avoided.
What has improved is inflation seems to have started leading in the right direction, in other words, down. Headline inflation in particular. What has improved is the prospect for China to boost growth.
We are now heading to a year where hopefully the corporates, the consumers, the state, policymakers will continue to have that resilient, determined approach in order to engineer the transitions that must take place.
Climate activists, including Greta Thunberg, were also there. They've launched an online petition demanding energy firms to stop any new oil, gas or coal extraction projects or face possible legal action.
President Joe Biden has said damage in California will take years to repair. The US leader was visiting the state after deadly storms killed at least 21 people.
You know, while the situation is still treacherous, we're cautiously optimistic that the worst part is behind. The waters recede, but we'll see the full extent of the damage to the homes, the businesses, and the farms and ranches. And we now we know some of the destruction is going to take years to fully recover and rebuild. But we got to not just rebuild, we got to rebuild better. We got to rebuild better.
He said the storm should serve as a wake-up call.
If anybody doubts the climate is changing, then they must have been asleep for the last couple of years.
Inspecting some of the damage, the president warned the climate crisis would create more extreme weather in the future. 500 federal workers have been sent to California to support emergency services. The president's approved a major disaster declaration for the state, freeing additional federal resources for recovery efforts. Since Boxing Day, the state's received extreme amounts of rain and 15 feet of snow fell in the higher parts of Sierra Nevada.
In Sweden, 2 brothers have been jailed, one of them for life, the other for 10 years, after being found guilty of spying for Russia for over a decade. Prosecutors said the pair acted purely for the money. The only purpose of the act, as we can see from the evidence, has been for those involved to simply enrich themselves, and there are no extenuating circumstances. 42-year-old Payman Kier had a background in the Swedish security police and armed forces, and at the time of his arrest in 2021, he was working as a high-ranking head of a major authority. Later, his younger brother Payam was also arrested. The brothers are alleged to have passed numerous documents to Russia, and one is said to have dropped a broken hard drive into a bin at a bus stop. Both have consistently denied the charges.
British and Irish ministers agree. A fully functioning assembly in Northern Ireland is an urgent priority.
I'm passionately of the view that when you have elections, what should naturally follow is the convening of an assembly or a parliament and a government. That's democracy in action, and the people of Northern Ireland deserve no less. And I made these points to UP and to other political parties.
But you will be aware that there are also important talks going on in Brussels between the UK government and the European Union. And if we can solve one problem, we might be able to solve another.
The problem of the DUP's boycott of Stormont over the Northern Ireland Protocol became more urgent at midnight, with the passing of the deadline to restore power sharing, a deadline that in law triggers a 12-week countdown to a new election in Northern Ireland, and a chance to restore Stormont before the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement.
Thousands are asking for a new presidential election and a new constitution in Peru. Demonstrators poured into the streets of Lima to protest against President Dina Boluarte, demanding her to resign. Boluarte took over former President Pedro Castillo, who was impeached after a failed coup last month. Castillo was very supported by indigenous farmers who feel left behind by the political elites. His supporters, many of them coming from remote Andean regions, clashed with police that prevented them from reaching key government buildings in the capital. About 50 people have died during the unrest that has been going on for 5 weeks.
The message is as simple as it is striking. More than 1,000 rotting apples have been dumped outside London's metropolitan headquarters, New Scotland Yard. The protest is by women's charity Refuge, who want to highlight the scale of abuse allegations involving Met officers.
We've been told time and time again that it's one bad apple here and there. This is actually a fundamental problem right across policing, not just in the Met but nationally, and we are saying that this has to be called out now and addressed because women's lives are at risk.
The Met is currently reviewing previous allegations of violence against women and girls made against 1,071 police officers and staff members. It comes after a former police officer pleaded guilty to dozens of rapes and sexual offences. New Scotland Yard has recently announced plans to reform the force, including its vetting processes. Fun Feminism presents some 40 works from the Kunstmuseum Basel collection dating from the 1960s to the 90s. The exhibition has chosen a feminist prism, deliberately irreverent and sometimes provocative to break the stereotypes usually associated with women. Humour, poetry, playfulness and joy, and of course a whole range of feminine attributes and sensibilities. The Museum of Contemporary Art in Rome is presenting Digital Antibodies, an exhibition that explores the new relationship between our digitalised world and contemporary reality. Our computer screens, tablets and mobiles are all surfaces connected to the world and social networks. The exhibition questions our relationship as individuals, drowned in big data, and soon, who knows, potentially replaced by artificial intelligence. The Music Animal exhibition turns the ear towards the living. The vocalisation of birds, the movement of insects, the melodic songs of whales, and the howls of wolves. All this while showing the extraordinary influence of animal voices in the history of art and music. This exhibition questions the future of biodiversity, and the disappearance of an endangered sound heritage.